We still have time, right? Now, look here. This is the Japanese islands, or should I say Japanese peninsula 20,000 years ago. This bowl-shaped part that sticks out from the continent is Japan before the Jomon period, which is 20,000 years ago. There's no Sea of Japan yet, but only a huge lake. Hokkaido, Honshu, Kyushu, and Shikoku are all combined and connected to Korean peninsula, except there is a river flowing in between. What will become a strait is still just a large river at this point. Hokkaido and Siberia are connected completely. This was 20,000 years ago. The Seto Inland Sea isn't there yet either. This is the Japanese peninsula and it's super large. Because of this vast peninsula, we could have maintained laurel forests and deciduous broad-leaved forests. In other words, the reason why ancient Japan was a large forest was because it was a huge peninsula 20,000 years ago. Today's Japanese islands cannot sustain such huge forests. Since there was not even the Seto Inland Sea of Japan yet, but a huge piece of land which could grow forests of the scale that allowed these gods to exist. The sizes of Japan today and 20,000 years ago are too different. Because it was a huge land that could hold huge forests, the gods of dogs and the wild boar gods who appear in Princess Mononoke could exist there. Do you remember Okoto, the leader of the wild boar god? He came from the west Kyushu region. But in Princess Mononoke, Okoto laments for the current situation. He commented, "Look at my tribe. We grow small and we grow stupid." In reality, Okoto and his tribe were not destroyed by losing a war against humans. The reason why they were destroyed was... Now, I have to talk about this. This is the difference between the average temperature from 10,000 years ago until today. But you see how the average temperature was lower by 5 degrees Celsius back then. But at around the beginning of the Jomon period, the temperature went up to 7 to 8 degrees, which would be around 2 degrees higher than now. So what happened 10,000 years ago because of this change? Seawater shrinks if it's cold and expands if it's hot. In other words, the reason why sea level rises when the earth becomes warm is not because the ice melts, but the sea itself slightly expands due to the increase of the temperature. So what it means for the earth to be 5 degrees colder than now was that the sea level went down. So the Japanese islands, well, in this case, the whole Japanese peninsula rose up from the sea. But as you can see on the chart, 7,000 years ago, the temperature boosted all the way up to 7 degrees. It said that as a result, the sea level was increased by 100 meters. In other words, a great part of Japanese land went underwater a long time ago. As a result, the Seto Inland Sea was formed. While most of the huge forests in Japan that nurture the ancient Japanese gods, such as the Totoro tribe or wild boar gods, sank into the sea. Most or the pretty much half of the land has submerged into the sea, and Kinki region got flooded. We often say, oh, this area used to be underwater, but that's due to the rising temperatures between 6 to 7,000 years ago. By the way, have you ever heard of Kikai Caldera? We know the specific year, 7,300 years ago. It's a volcano off the coast of Kagoshima Prefecture in Kyushu region. It's been said that magma has accumulated there once again, so it's dangerous. Anyway, there was a huge eruption of Kikai Caldera 7,300 years ago. This was such a great eruption that would have destroyed the entire human race if it were to happen again. It's said that it wiped out the whole civilization of the early Jomon period. Well, I'll talk more about this when I discuss Princess Mononoke. But the reason why Okoto and the wild boar gods became smaller and smaller as they moved up from the west is because there was a large eruption of Kikai Caldera. It's like the second impact of Evangelion. As a result, Kyushu became no longer habitable, and just like how the early Jomon civilization was wiped out, Okoto's tribe moved towards the east all at once. At the same time, the amount of sea level rose, and finally, a strait was formed between Korea and Japan. As a result, the Sea of Japan was also formed, where the warm ocean current streamed into. Mamiya or Tertiary Strait was formed in the north, and cold water entered in from Siberia, which created the warm current. As a result, there were now heavy snowfalls along the Sea of Japan, where the snow piled up high. Then Japan became warm for the first time in history, surrounded by more seas, and rice farming started. As the rice was mass-produced, what happened was, forests were cleared and became rice fields. The population showed rapid increase. As a result, the wild boar gods were destroyed by humans. The gods in Princess Mononoke were not destroyed as a result of forests being cut down or burned. In the first place, there were magnificent forests in Japan 10 to 20,000 years ago because Japan used to be a peninsula. However, the sea level rose by about 100 meters and the temperature rose by 7 degrees, and the forests were lost. At the same time, a huge explosion occurred in Kikai Caldera, and from the Kyushu region to perhaps the Chugoku region became uninhabitable. As a result, people moved toward the east, but that was the time that Yayoi people came from China and the Korean peninsula and began to grow rice and cut down the forest at a furious speed. That's why wild boar gods hate iron and fire. They hate iron because the Yayoi people who make rice use iron. At the same time, they hate fire because it reminds them of Kikai Caldera. Well, that's the basic setting of Princess Mononoke, and more importantly, this is the story of Totoro's ancestors. The ancient gods of Princess Mononoke originally flourished on the earth 20,000 years ago, kind of like Cthulhu. They were the indigenous people and humans were outsiders. But they lost their homes due to the volcano eruption of Kikai Caldera and the rising of the sea level 6,000 years ago. I'll go in depth about this when I discuss Princess Mononoke. But these Jomon people were good friends with the Totoro tribe. They were engaged in agriculture but in a small scale. However, the agriculture of the Yayoi people was in a large scale. They cut down the ancient forests to make fuels and to convert them into rice fields. As I said earlier, these ancient forests eventually turned into somewhere easily accessible by humans. The deep forests that had once been filled with the ancient sawtooth oaks and beeches were quickly lost during the Jomon period and became easy-to-use copses. So, what we are seeing right now isn't really natural. We go camping in the mountains and feel the nature, but that nature is a result of humans remodeling the entire Japanese islands through agriculture. 99% of them are not primeval forests anymore. Only the forests created by humans through agriculture remain.